chairs coming in, then we'll get started.
Nice to see you.
Well, first of all, let me just say thank you very much for being here today. With the forecast, we didn't know what to expect. We didn't know, even at one point, there was discussion even whether we should have this meeting or not. So the fact that you are here through this weather, we really appreciate it. I want to thank Lou Lanza and John Sharp, who are allowing us to use the space. So thank you, Lou and John. Of course, we want to thank County Executive Latimer for taking the trip all the way up here. He's been doing these coffee and conversations with all my colleagues, all 17 of us. We just found out number 14 of the 17 that he's done. And he's really making sure he reaches out to the communities throughout Westchester. And here he is in Peekskill today. And by the time he's done with all legislators, every district of Westchester will be covered. We have coffee being brewed. If it's not done, it will be done soon.
Another 10 minutes.
We have pastries from Homestyle, so we're good. We're ready to go. So I just want to welcome the County Executive of Peekskill and Northern Westchester. We're here to answer your questions, but I'm going to turn it over to the County Executive.
Thank you, John. I appreciate it. Well, good morning, everybody. I'm the new kid in the room, George Latimer, Westchester County Executive for not quite 10 months. And as John said, this is one of a series of outreach meetings that we're doing all around the county. John and I are here today, but as he said, with each of his colleagues, two things are important to know. Number one, that this is unfiltered. No one's being asked to submit a question. Nobody is asking, for scrutinize who you are, what you want to say. You say what you want to say. Obviously, we appreciate you being respectful. We know the big issues, the homeless shelter. We're going to get into it in 1 second. But we also want to make sure there's time to talk about other issues, Indian Point, or anything else you want to talk about. So I think what we're probably going to do is informally let like the first half of the meeting be about the homeless shelter, get people express their opinions, and we'll tell you where we're coming from. And then at that point, at some point, because most likely it'll be a continuation of people who will post something and why, then we'll want to get into other issues, because I have to leave right around 11:30 or so. The second thing may seem a little obvious, but I think it's worth pointing out. You're watching disagreement in Washington, D.C. and Albany that we've never seen before. The kind of dispute, the kind of nastiness is unprecedented. John's a Republican, I'm a Democrat. He's the head of the Republicans on the legislature, and I guess since I'm the county executive, I'm the most prominent Democrat. We disagree on a number of issues. I don't have any problem with his disagreement. He doesn't have any problem with my disagreement, and we're sitting here together. We're sitting here because we have responsibility to try to work together and to try to find solutions. And where we can be on the same side of the page, we will. Where we can't be on the same side of the page, we fight for our beliefs. But we don't have to be enemies. And I think that's what will help us solve our problems in Westchester County. If we can maintain that mindset, this kind of climate that we're dealing in, and you can blame a lot of people for it, and multiple people for it. We don't want to replicate it here. Otherwise, we won't be able to be successful. So let me jump into the homeless shelter situation right off the bat. When I'm finished talking, then by all means, we'll go one at a time. Everybody who wants to be heard will be heard. And as soon as the coffee is ready, we'll know. Get up and get a cup of coffee and eat some of the pastries. Just get up, walk over, and get them. Don't worry about the motion or anything. We want you to do that. I certainly don't want to leave you with any of those pastries in my car. As you can see, one of my obvious problems is right there on my waistline. First of all, I want to hand you a letter, which I want you to pass out to the people sitting next to you. Make sure it goes all the way through the room. This is a letter that John and I have both jointly signed. I'm going to read it to you, and I'm going to read another letter that we received this week, and we'll try to talk about where we are at in this process, because there's a lot of misinformation out there. This is an open letter to Peekskill residents. The current debate over a proposal to rezone land to enable a homeless shelter to relocate to Washington Street has engaged residents and community leaders for a number of weeks. Among the information that has been circulated formally and informally, there has been misinformation circulated as well. Westchester County government, the county executive and the Board of Legislators, has no direct role in the selection or determination for a site to serve Peekskill's homeless population. We are not decision makers on this site. nor do we as elected officials have expressed an opinion or indicated support for any specific proposal for relocation of the site. Any statement to the contrary, which seeks to express our support or involvement in the determination of a site is false. These contentious matters are subject to the home rule authority of a local government, based on decisions made by the nonprofit entity that owns or runs the facility. The matter will be debated and resolved by the people and the leaders of Peekskill, and advocacy should be directed to that level of government. John's been mayor of this city. I was a councilman in Rise City. The issue of what happens on a piece of land and whether or not it's the right use for a particular site belongs to the local government. This isn't passing the ball to somebody else. This is home rule. If the county had that authority, then we would step in on 1,000 different projects where we like or don't like something happening. But the home rule power of Buchanan here, Dwayne Jackson representing Buchanan's in the room, the home rule power of the town of Yorktown, the town of Portland, makes the decision on zoning property. And in this particular case, the decision by the agency, CHOP, to buy this property or have an option to buy the property, I'm not sure where exactly they are and all of this stuff, is a decision they have made, and they are now going to the Peekskill City Government to see if the Peekskill City Government approves. When there is a facility or the same facility or some third location or whatever it is, that is when the county gets involved, and that's when we contract with that agency or some other agency to handle the homeless population. And if you don't think that's accurate, check in with what's going on in Yonkers right now. There's a big issue of a homeless in Getty Square. And we are working with the city government, and we have asked them, identify what sites do you approve of, and what kind of group sharing community is the name of the group down there. Whatever site you pick, as long as it can accommodate what we can do, you get it. We'll contract with them, and then in that particular location, we're talking about having day programs. But it's very important to understand the different levels of the responsibility of these governments. Now, that you feel strongly, you should express that. And whatever influence we have individually, unofficially, we will try to exert in our conversations with people. At the end of the day, whatever contract we sign to house the homeless with an agency will have to be something that our administration sends to the Board of Legislators for their approval. And we will have to make that public policy decision. But the place where it is going to be is a decision made by the agency that would provide the service. And if it requires a change in zoning, which Washington Street does, would be a decision made by the city, the Common Council of Peekskill. I've driven by the site, I've walked through the neighborhood. So just because I live a few miles away from you, that doesn't mean like I don't know. I've made a point to take a look. And I've been in Peekskill a number of times since I became county executive. I was here for the fire department recognition of the men who died here at the Fleischman Gin fire back 100 years ago. I did an NAACP town hall meeting a little over a month ago, and I was here for the HVCCA art exhibit, that big art weekend. So I may be a stranger to you, but I'm not a stranger to Peekskill. I'm learning it. I'm learning the community. But the issue of where a homeless center goes, homeless shelter goes, is an issue in every community that has one. This is not unique to you or to your neighborhood around this place. And let's be candid. Most people don't want that kind of facility near them wherever you go. If these things were easy to cite, they'd have been done like that. However, the decision to cite is a local decision in each community. So while you're here, express your opinion. We're going to, as I said, block probably the first half of the meeting for everybody who's here at that point to express their opinion. But then at some point, we're going to stop it so that we can touch on other issues. Because if somebody's here to discuss something else, we want to make sure that those issues come out as well. We're scheduled to go to 11:30. You know, we certainly aren't going to leave 11:30, boom, right on the spot. And John, of course, represents his district well. He's going to have many other kinds of meetings in all corners of his district. This isn't meant to be the only time to do this, but I expect we'll be back again probably next year, whether we do it in Peekskill, Buchanan, or Portland, or, you know, whatever John decides is fine. And there'll be other sessions that we have elsewhere. You're certainly welcome to reach out to me directly. A couple of you have sent me emails on the topic. If you have sent the email and you haven't gotten a response, it's because we're trying to research exactly what the status of these things are. So you're not being ignored, but we're trying to make sure that what we speak of is positive. Now, one more thing to say. I did not know who Mary Ann McCarra-Fitzpatrick is. I was introduced to her a few minutes ago. She received a letter. You may have gotten a similar letter if you also wrote the state government. And I'm going to read this letter to you. This letter is from a fellow named Adam Gorman, Administrative Specialist 1, Division of Shelter Oversight and Compliance with the New York State Office of Temporary and Disability Assistance. And he says to Ms. McCarra-Fitzpatrick, your correspondence of October 5th, 2008 to Governor Cuomo regarding the potential relocation of a facility for individuals facing homelessness from Water Street to Washington Avenue, Peekskill, has been forwarded to, and then he mentions his office. He says, unfortunately, OTDA is unable to address your concerns regarding this particular site. The Division of Shelter Oversight and Compliance is responsible for the certification and inspection of homeless shelters throughout New York State. However, the state of New York is not a party to the selection of buildings or sites that will be operated as shelters. That is correct. My editorializing. Next sentence is not correct. That responsibility is carried out by the Westchester County Department of Social Services. Incorrect. As such, your concern should be better directed to Mr. Kevin McGuire. Commissioner gives you the address of Kevin McGuire, who's the DSS Commissioner for Westchester County. I called the governor's office and I said I want a correction to this letter. Handler has every right, Gorman has every right to say that the state isn't directly involved in the decision. That's a fair statement. But to throw it back to the county DSS is incorrect, and I expect to see in writing to whoever received this letter, Mary and anybody else, a correction of that point. And if for some reason they're unwilling to admit that, then I will deal with that in a public domain subsequently. The reality of it is that whenever you get a hot button issue, everybody wants to pawn it off. We have hot button issues in the county that are county responsibility. We have a responsibility right now with the New Rochelle Family Court at the diagonal opposite end of the county. On that particular case, we do have to make a decision in concert with the Office of Court Administration. So it's not bucking the issue. It's knowing what our authority is and what isn't it, issue by issue by issue. And in the case of the New Rochelle thing, we have a direct role to play. In the case of this issue, we do not. You have a copy of the letter that John and I have both signed, and we're happy to hear whatever you have to say about the topic. If I can respond, we will. And I'm going to sit down, and John will recognize you because he knows everybody by name, which is a good thing. And we'll go one by one through the room, and everybody gets to say.
Well, the first hand, Lindsay, yes.
Good morning, George. Thank you for being here, and thank you, everyone else. There's a lot of folks here, and a lot of friendly neighbors that I see. So, my name is Lindsay Fitzgerald. I'm one of the people that emailed you that I did not get a response from you, but thank you for acknowledging that you did receive it. A couple of things. Number one, we've got over 1,000 people who signed a petition against this. And part of the biggest problem is we're hearing from you, we're hearing from everybody, we have no say in this. Except everyone is pointing at everybody else. And you're supposed to be our leadership, you're supposed to be representing us. We know that the county, in addition to the city, has close ties with the organization trying to put a homeless shelter within 250 feet of 2 school bus stops, and nobody wants to step in to help.
Lindsay, can I ask you a question?
Mediate.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Is the proposal to rezone the property to allow for the homeless shelter, is that before the Common Council of Peekskill right now for decision?
I don't think it is.
No? Is that my understanding?
No, it is not.
But, so.
Hold on. Well, let's just stay with this. Can anybody answer that question? I want Lindsay still has the floor.
Thank you.
I want to see if, does anybody have a question? Can they answer the question? Is this before the city of Peekskill to decide on the zoning? Yes,
Yes, I can answer the question.
Yes, go ahead.
Everybody knows, I think, that I'm the executive director of Caring for the Hungry and Homeless of Peekskill. Thank you both for doing this town hall tonight. There is no application pending presently before the city of Peekskill. And we have repeatedly said that publicly.
And so therefore, at this stage of the game, you would not be able to use the homeless shelter, Cynthia, on Washington Street until that has been approved by the city, if it's a change in zoning. Is that not correct?
That is correct, and also it requires construction and rehabilitation. We've also said that this is an 18 to 24-month process. It's not happening.
So Lindsay, back to you. It's not that nobody makes a decision. It's that if this homeless shelter is going to be activated, it will take the Common Council of Peekskill to agree to do it. That's where the decision has to be made if this is going to happen. If we don't have the authority to make it, we're not passing the buck. We just don't have the authority to make it.
The only problem I see there is that the mayor of Peekskill, Andre Rainey, said that he was. So we went to the city. The city says we're waiting on the county. The state says we're waiting on the county. The county says it's the city. So nobody
I'll clarify in writing. We'll get to the heart of what you want.
Wait, hold on.
I'll clarify with the city in writing that they are not waiting on the county for anything. That it is, if the city gets an application to use the site for homeless, that it's their decision to make for rezoning. If there was no rezoning necessary, then it wouldn't be a city issue. But if there is a rezoning, it is. If what has been stated by anybody, that they're waiting for the county, I'm going to do the same thing as I did with this. I'm going to clarify it and make it very clear in writing that there is no pending decision by the county, so that it's clear in your mind and everybody else's mind what's the decision line and who's in that decision line. And the truth of the matter is, if it is a change in venue from where they are now to some other place, and that place that they plan to change cannot be used, the use of it has to be approved municipally, then it will go before the city for their decision-making process. Saying it's the county's decision is not accurate, and I will clarify that for you. And I'm going to assume, John, you have everybody's address. So if I have a letter, give it to John.
They have mine, I know.
And if we have a clarification letter that I need to get from the city, so that you're clear, because you raised a question, you've been told by the city that we're waiting for the county. I want to clear that up so that nobody thinks they're waiting for the county anything. I'll make sure that response goes to John, John gets it to you, and then you'll know that we're not passing the buck, we're just stating what is accurately accurate fact.
Thank you.
Fair enough?
I sent you, if I may finish. So, I sent you the link of the mayor saying that, so you can see for yourself his words. But what would be nice is for our elected officials to step up and help us with this, because we, on more than one occasion, have been trying to, number one, have them hear our voices. What we find out is that the homeless shelter is very well connected with City Hall. There's a lot of conflict of interest. The people in our neighborhood do not feel represented on City Hall, to the fact that the mayor and the councilwoman have already signed a petition supporting the project before they knew anything about it. So if you can see the picture I'm painting here, we are not being represented. Not by our state elected officials, not by our city elected officials, and we don't feel like we're being represented by our county elected officials. And there's a problem there, because we are your constituents. So we'd like, even though it may not be a decision point for you at this point in time, you can certainly step in and help broker something so that we don't want CHOP to buy a building that they can't use, because we're going to fight this for as long as we have to fight this. So even though Cynthia says it takes 2 years, it's going to take longer than 2 years. And then what are you going to do then when you have a $900,000 building that you can't use with a nonprofit organization? And the last thing I'd like to add.
Can I just say one comment? You raised a very good point, and it may be that we can help broker a solution. Even if we're not directly responsible, as long as everybody... conversation about this, we may be able to get parties around the table and see what we can do to resolve it, if that's possible. It may work, it may not work, but that's a reasonable request.
Thank you. And then I just want to leave you with some information.
Okay.
You can review at your leisure. These are fact sheets, and I have extra for anyone who doesn't have it. The biggest concern for neighbors, are the 200 public safety calls that the current shelter receives per year. Some of them are for drug overdoses, assaults, really significant problems. And George, you said you walked the neighborhood? Or you were in the neighborhood?
Yeah, I just drove around.
Okay. Well, thank you for doing that, because that's important. You can see
it's residential.
It's all residential.
Once you get off Washington Street, it's all residential.
Yeah. And so that type of activity, regardless of the development that you want to put in, is not appropriate for that area. So even though it's a homeless shelter, if it was, you know, a warehouse, if it was anything, that is not appropriate there. It just happens to be a homeless shelter that's going in there. So thank you for your time. That's all I have.
Can I just make an amendment with regard to just the zoning issue, which is that in Peekskill, there is no zoning for a homeless shelter, even where we are located now. And Corporation Council has said that it is not allowed in the Waterfront 2 district, where we are, It is not written into the zoning code anywhere. To be fully compliant with the law in any district in Peekskill, we would need a zoning text amendment.
So we should just write it wherever we want to put it.
Let me just try to clarify the zoning process, since Cynthia brought up and Lindsay brought up. Nothing can move forward in the zoning process until the city council receives a proposal for the zoning text amendment that was mentioned. And then the council will have to vote to approve or disapprove, assuming they approve to move forward. Then it would go to the zoning board for whatever variances may be attached to that property. It's a very extensive process. So we have never received any communication from anyone from the city at the county level, which is why we have not even had an opportunity to make a comment about it. It's not a county issue. If it was going on county land, then it would be a county related issue. It's only a county program through the county DSS, but we don't decide the location. So the city council has to make a decision on what they're going to do.
It may not be on county land, but it was county land and it's had a park property. I mean, you're less than half a mile from both the county park and town park. So I do think that the county needs to have some input here, because as it is now, we have a very large population of homeless living in the park. And then what my fear is, when CHOP turns them all away, they don't turn away drug addicts, junkies, or sexual predators, they are not going anywhere else but into the park. So now we're going to get an inquiry or lots of people going on. So that is county property. And it's less, I mean, it's like a lot.
I think you, I know all the issues with the location and the properties in the near area, but when the county does not have a veto power of where this goes, it does not have an oversight, does not have any legal way of stopping it, I think what the county executive recommended, I think, is the best way to do it. We'll broker some kind of sit down and see if we can come up with an agreement that makes everyone happy. Because I think everybody in this room agrees that the homeless shelter is not the issue of what their goal is to help the homeless population and those people who need the help. It's about where it's located. So.
Who owns that house now? The building?
The building that they're presently in?
Right. Well, no, the building that they're proposing to move.
There's three owners.
Three owners?
Three Florida owners, two live in Florida, one's actually running the business out of it.
What kind of business?
It's a train warehouse. You know, all the toy trains that you would have at Christmas when your
I mean,
kids.
is there any connection? This is my question. Is there any connection between the owners and the mayor or any of the council members?
Not so much.
I don't know.
None whatsoever. And actually, when this property went up for sale in April, they came and looked at it in June-ish, and there was an agreement made at the end of June for them to leave a deposit on the property. This is all straight out of the guy who works at the train station, so I'm not making any of this up. Okay, I'm in the shop right next door. Richie and I talk all the time. I plow his driveway for him, I take his packages when he's not there, so we're very friendly. So he told me that they came and they laid them a deposit, and they said they got 60 days to do all their whatever. They were going to build the ground, and they were going to do all this stuff, and they did nothing. And the last day came at the end of August, and it was Friday afternoon at 5:30, and his lawyer received a fax that the rest of the money would be deposited on Monday. We're going to go forward with the project, and that's when I found out about it. It was about a week before Labor Day, and that's when the final, okay, we're going to give you the 45, we're going to give you that on it, and we're going to go forward with it. And that's when I found out, and that's when I started telling everybody what was going on, because I don't think it's the right spot for it. And I found an article back in 2007 when there was a mayoral race that the New York Times wrote that the person running the shelter at that time said this was the exact place for it because it was out of eyesight. It was down in the corner where they were to themselves, and it was still reasonably close to everything they needed to get to. Now you're going to take that person who ran that shelter for I don't know how many years, and you're going to take it out of where she said it was there. She was running it, I guess, pretty steadily for a bunch of years, and move it to where all these neighborhood people are. And it's not good.
Who's the realtor?
You can't get an answer out of that. The realtor who's selling the building, I can, but I can't get the sales realtor. Nobody will.
No, we hear, look, as a member of the public, I'm hearing lots of rumors that there's some kind of
Connection to the mayor?
relationship from the realtor or the owner of the building to a council member or the mayor.
Well, it's not the owner of the building.
Well, we would have no knowledge of that, to be quite honest with you. We're not involved. I know of the issue, but I don't know of the people involved. I really couldn't answer.
Well, the city
Can I
council's
address
beginning to push it
Brian?
on you guys.
Can I
Okay,
address Brian's
and we'll go
point?
back to, go ahead.
Brian, just in terms of the timeline, and I totally believe that's what Richie told you, so I'm not questioning your veracity, but we entered into contract at the end of June.
Right, yeah.
And we did begin doing our
what he
environmental
said.
study.
I said June-ish, that was when the
Can I
end.
finish?
Yeah, continue.
And then we did do our due diligence. We did do the environmental study.
What did you do for environmental studies?
The environmental study, people, it's like this long, I can't tell you. But what I'm saying
Oh,
is,
why can't you tell us?
the timeline.
But I've never seen anyone there, that's what I'm saying.
Let me just finish, Brian, okay?
Then we're
I
gonna have to move back and
believe that's
forth.
what Richie told you.
But go ahead.
But I'm telling you what.
Tell me what you got.
At the end of June, we entered into contract,
Mhm.
and we began doing our due diligence under the contract. It was not in September that we said to them.
I didn't say
okay,
anything about September, I said before
You
Labor
said Labor
Day.
Day.
I said
Okay,
before Labor Day.
before.
Okay.
Okay, if you want to have a conversation, so.
I am having a
I
conversation.
say-
I want to make sure everything's
But
right.
if you want
Let's
to.
let some other people
I'm
have,
welcome to.
yes.
So I think I'm going back to the questions that were answered before. So the thing where, we were thinking how, there's a little bit of stuff that we're concerned about. Ruth Wells is on the planning commission of Peekskill. She's also a board member of CHOP, right? Ruth Wells' husband he is on the zoning board of appeals. There's a lot of connection in here that seems like that's not a good thing. If people are going to have to recuse themselves from any kind of vote or any kind of influence over this because it's not.
Why do people assume they would not
I can
recuse
just add to what
themselves?
Mary-
Yes, go ahead, answer what you said.
There's nothing
I just
before
want to
that.
add to what Mary Ann is saying. This kind of adds to what Lindsay is saying. I think a lot of us are reaching out to you for help because there are 3 major players, not only on the board of Peekskill in some way, shape, or form, that are also tied to the board of CHOP. So as residents, we really feel that maybe we're not getting the full honesty. And that's, I think, where we really would like your help.
Well, we can't make people be honest, we will dive into this a little bit more, as the county executive mentioned. We'll get people around the table who make the decisions. Unfortunately, none of them are here today to address that, but they, just to give them, being in their position at one point, they have not been presented anything to make a decision on yet, so they have to get that petition in front of them. If they have made privately commitments or non-commitments, that's their private business. And I understand the connections you were relaying to, and maybe some of those people will have to not be part of the decision-making when the time comes, but they have not made it yet, so. But we cannot go in and say, you cannot put this application in, you cannot move forward. We can't do that, but we can try to bring cooler heads to the issue and maybe talk about it, maybe we can find a solution. We will try.
I know that I don't know how much their architectural drawings may have cost, but why would you spend thousands of dollars on architectural drawings for that facility when you don't even know that it's going to go through, unless you have some sort of inside knowledge?
And then Bob, did you have your hand up before or no?
Me?
I thought you did, or somebody in the
I
front.
did.
Yeah.
And it was
Then you, Bob.
It was a little connected to that because you brought up the zoning. So I was just wondering, what is a typical process? Because it seems like they're taking a lot of steps toward this idea that they're already getting the building, even though the zoning hasn't been done yet. So I'm wondering if us seeing those steps is a legitimate reason for us to be concerned about why they feel so confident this is going to happen before it's even been put before them.
I can't answer that because I'm not part of it, but
Why-
I understand why the concern is up, but you know, many times these deals go through contingent on the approvals, and sometimes people take the chance if they are willing to take the chance, but it is a crapshoot in some ways if they don't have the agreements ahead of time, but that's their decision to make. We can't tell them not to make it.
You're a non-profit organization, and whose money are you spending to do all that?
Yeah, that's not private only.
Yes, Bob.
And a good segue into my question. I understand, Mr. Latimer, that of course the county doesn't have a direct decision. I think we all understand. We get how county government works. We get the zoning. When you look at the financing of CHOP, I think their latest 990 in 2016, something like $700,000 of their money on an operating basis every year comes from the county. The balance comes from HUD and the Veterans Administration. And in terms of their fundraising, it's very little portion of their budget. So we recognize that there's no direct decision making from the county. But does it concern the county a little bit that it is effectively financing an organization and will be financing operations in a neighborhood where the people who are paying that money don't want it there? I make one comment, and that was with respect to the zoning. I'm a lawyer by trade. I don't do anything with zoning. And by the way, I don't even live in that neighborhood. I buy my McDonald's coffee in that neighborhood. The political landscape of this town. When I ran this Your Running Mate on the Independence Party ticket, I was hassled for that.
We did pretty well on that line.
Yeah, but
on that line.
The question is on the zoning. You know, there's this discussion about, well, abracadabra, we got to go down and we got to make a text amendment to zoning. But my understanding is, it isn't as simple as that. The city council has to make a finding when it changes or makes a text amendment that is not inconsistent with the development plan of the city. So that the city has been allowing it down in the waterfront district in a different area of town is one thing. But to put it on Washington Street in a residential neighborhood where the zoning for years has zoned it as such, I think is a little inaccurate, but I think that's for greater legal minds than mine. But if I may answer the question.
Yeah, no, I'll answer the first portion of your question is legitimate. The money that this organization and any organization gets from the county is contractual. It is, they provide a certain service and we pay for that service. And that service involves some federal reimbursement or state reimbursement. Every one of these things is a bit different. So we do have quote-unquote financial leverage. So to that extent, you're correct. Which is why brokering a meeting of all the people around the table makes sense. But I have to tell you, we have literally hundreds of these kinds of relationships with not-for-profits that provide a host of different things in the area of social services. Primarily because we don't, as big as the bureaucracy is for DSS right now, and it's the biggest department of county government, if the government itself did all of these things itself, the thing would be this big. And instead of paying a certain fee to an organization to do a function, it would all come out of tax dollars, whether it's local or federal and so forth. So bottom line is, the money that we use to pay for the services of a not-for-profit to provide for the homeless housing in Peekskill, ditto Yonkers, ditto White Plains, ditto New Rochelle, we don't necessarily get involved in the day-to-day decisions. Now, this obviously is a decision that's not a day-to-day decision. You've got a neighborhood that's outraged over the possibility of the changing of a location, so that makes a reason for us to get involved to try to broker some arrangement. Since I don't know any of the details about how the building was potentially financed for purchase, all of that's unknown to me, I don't think John knows it either, we will try to determine what we can do. If we have a meeting on this topic, we'll try to do it at Peekskill City Hall, because we know the people that are interested in it don't want to schlep down to White Plains for a meeting. What I would probably suggest is that you distill yourself into a committee of a certain number of people to walk in a room, because this session is to get it out of your system. If we're sitting around the table to have a discussion, we can't have 35 people, doing this and that. So if you do have a subsection of you that represents the leadership of the neighborhood, by all means identify what that is. Whenever this meeting comes up, John, I'm sure will inform you. I'll talk to the mayor, or whatever, I'll talk to the mayor. And Yeah, I'll tell them we're gonna have to meet it, and then you can tell them the logistics.
Okay,
I'll tell them we're
very
gonna have to meet it, that's gonna happen.
Sounds
But
good.
out of that process will come, the state does in fact certify, that was what was accurate in this letter that I read by Gorman, and they will want to know, and they will hold the county responsible, how are you handling the homeless of Peekskill? And we will respond to them by saying, we have a contract with CHOP or something else, what I don't know, and through that contract, we are handling the homeless of Peekskill. As we have a contract with the sharing community in Yonkers to handle the homeless of Yonkers and ditto Oasis and the other places, Samaritan House and White Plains. So to that extent, we have leverage. How much of that leverage in the negotiation will depend? It depends on where CHOP is at on things. We don't want to talk about that publicly. We'll have that as a private understanding. We'll talk, obviously, to the Peekskill city officials, see where their head is at. Obviously, you've made an impression. Certainly made an impression on me. But let me tell you, I've been around for 31 years in this business. I've served a lot of different levels of government. At the end of the day, I get the big picture. The big picture is the neighborhood doesn't want this.
We're worried about our safety, we're worried about our property values. We're not outraged, because if we were outraged, this would be so calm. So we want to have an open dialogue. We haven't had the opportunity to have that open dialogue, and we listen to. Every chance we get a dollar from. So this is our first chance where we've actually been able to have a dialogue with somebody. But please, don't misconstrue. We are not outraged.
No, that's why we're listening. I didn't. Is this the first time?
They've been to council meetings, right? You've been to council meetings.
Yeah.
You've had your own public meetings, but formally at a council meeting, obviously the citizens to be heard section is what it is. But you have not had a formal meeting like this with the local government, is what you're saying.
Right, I'm Brian, I have the repair shop right
Yes.
next to the property they want to buy. I probably have the most to lose out of anybody in here other than everybody's property values going right down the road. We've tried many times to speak with Cynthia and the rest of her board. I've asked. They had a meeting on October 3rd where they put 45 minutes worth of we're terrific people out there, and they gave us about 3 minutes a person, 5 people spoke. Not much to go on, and they pushed Lindsay off after about 10 minutes, wouldn't give her the 15 that she thought she might get, okay? They don't want to talk to us because they don't know what to say to us, all right? I don't know if they can go forward with any of this stuff until they actually purchase the property. I haven't purchased it yet. This is still in a contract. So I don't know if they can put the zonings forward and go into that without actually owning it. So that's something you would have to tell me because I have no clue. I'm not into that. I can tell you about an engine, but I can't tell you about zoning. So I'm looking at what they've got, and I look at their plan and all, and the only way I can see it working, and there's other things that play here too. There's a grant or something to refurbish the building, and they have to have some kind of contract from what I was reading online that I could find, but I couldn't find the exact grant they're going for. If they don't get a zoning permit, they might not get that grant to do the work because it's only a 3-year special use permit and has to be renewed every 3 years. So I don't know what they need.
I couldn't tell you anything about grants they may or may not have, but my experience with real estate and purchasing and like you say, renovations and change of use. Usually the purchase contract, which I have not seen, so I could not tell you what's in the purchase contract, if they own it outright at this point, or if there's a contingency in the contract for whatever reason. Sometimes there are, especially in commercial properties, the sale is contingent on getting whatever approvals that organization or new purchaser would like to use that building for, and then they would go forward with the process with the city, and either they would get the approval or not, and then the contract would be finalized or not. I couldn't tell you any of that. Cynthia would, has her contract that she.
I've asked, I put it out there many times.
I don't know what that is, but
they won't talk to us.
So that's why we need to sit down in a calmer, more productive for moving forward.
See how that happened? You changed her when I was asking her about the stuff and how she gets all defensive. That's exactly how it is every time.
Can I just say, when we redid our house, Brian, we had to go to planning and zoning to redo our house. We had to show proof that we owned the property.
Well, that's what happened next door to the house next door.
Before they would let us do it.
The house right next to it when it was foreclosed.
All I can tell you is nothing is going to move forward without a legal process being followed. Nothing's going to be done without approvals by the city. I can tell you that. I'm sure that that's
Well,
what the
yeah.
plan is.
Are there people that live in, sorry.
Good morning, County Executive. Thank you for coming up to Peekskill to speak with us. I think this is great. So, one question for you, or a couple questions, but one, they're all pretty simple. Is the county funding the purchase of this property at all?
To my knowledge, no. We have a contract for a service that they provide. Obviously, that revenue stream is important for them. But what they use their resources for in terms of the building is not anything we're directly involved in, to my understanding or knowledge.
Second question for you, do you support putting a homeless shelter in the middle of a residential neighborhood?
I generally support having a homeless shelter where it has local support. And so rather than doing the negative, I'd rather do it as a positive level. I'd rather see homeless shelters wherever in the county that they have the support of the local government and the local population, because when you don't have that support, you have nothing but trouble. You have all kinds of trouble.
Third question, and hopefully you can help us get this answer, because as you said, CHOP in essence is contracted with the county, so they should be answering any questions the county has. And maybe Cynthia can answer this for us. If she does not get, if CHOP does not get the zoning approvals, will they receive their deposit back for the purchase of this building?
Well, that's a question, obviously, we can't answer that, and I don't know that it's fair for her to have to answer this in this forum. What I would say is this: the reason to have a meeting where we get into the details of all of this with representatives from this group present is to try to get answers to questions like that in a less, intense environment. Let's be honest, if you were on one side of an issue and everybody else here was against you, you want to, not have your discussions in this forum. There are questions that I would naturally ask about anything. And they would start with the existing place you are now. Why are you leaving? What's the basis behind that? Is it an absolute decision that you have to leave? Is there no choice? Or is there a choice? Is the choice not within your control and you need some other entity to help you stay? I don't know. Is the current facility deteriorated beyond the point of safety? Then the next question is, if you have to leave this place for whatever reason it is, how many other places have you looked at? Is this place on Washington Street the only choice? Are there other choices? Whatever. And then your questions become relevant. If you're committed to Washington Street, how deeply financially are you committed to Washington Street? Is there a way to relieve your financial burden? And would that matter to you about going to Washington Street or not? And I say those things open-endedly. I don't know the answers to those, and we're not going to ask them now in this forum. But that's the process by which you try to get to an understanding. Do you have to leave where you are? If you have to leave where you are, what are your choices of where you're going to go? Does it have to be Washington Street? And if it doesn't have to be Washington Street, what third alternative exists that will get me a separate room of people here unhappy over? Because that's the other problem. And let's be honest. If it's not in your neighborhood, but it's in somebody else's neighborhood and they don't want it, that's okay for you, but not for them. At the end of the day, the county does have one responsibility. We have to help the homeless people in Peekskill. They're not coming in from, well, let me tell you, they're not coming in from Armonk. So the bottom line is, if they're on the streets of Yonkers, I don't know where they were before they had a Yonkers address. They might have started out in the Bronx. They might have started out in Mount Vernon. But the bottom line is they're sleeping on the streets of Yonkers tonight. They're sleeping on the streets of Mount Vernon tonight, and we have to address it within the context of where they are. If they were sleeping on the streets of Armonk, we'd have to deal with it in Armonk as well. That is our responsibility, tasked by the state government. And the state will fine us if we don't have an answer to that. So all those questions we would start out with in a meeting where we broker the players around the table, understand where we're at, and determine is there anything we can do over and above the way we contract with an agency to try to help resolve those things. I can tell you, I've seen a lot of site issues like this. Now, maybe not homeless housing, but other things. We don't want this in our neighborhood kind of things. Group home, you name it. I have seen situations get resolved. It doesn't get resolved in one meeting, doesn't get resolved in a couple of months, but it gets resolved. And all I can tell you is you're not wrong to be upset, but then you also have to engage in a process. And when that process is completed, you may find that you have a result that's acceptable to the agency, acceptable to the neighborhood, acceptable to the county, and it provides the service. That's what we're going to look for. We're going to look for what is the solution that has the most possible support from all of those different sources. Not I mean, you have every right to be upset today. I didn't realize, by the way, this is like the first big meeting you've had over this thing with elected officials. I assumed you'd had these other meetings before, but so be it. So we're here today. And that's why you should get it out. But by the same token, we're trying to figure out how do we get to a solution to this thing. So that at the end of the day, you can say, good, we have a resolution we can accept, and by the same token, the organization that's in business to do this service provides the service, and then we can contract with that to continue the service. That's the whole thing.
Thank you very much for that answer. Last question. DSS on Washington Street, county building. It's currently underutilized. A lot of services have been consolidated down county. Is there plans to continue that consolidation to have DSS move down county?
It's a good question, and I don't know the answer to that. I will ask Kevin McGuire, our commissioner, what his plans are. We have, generally speaking, been trying to consolidate space where we can to save money. But I don't know if that particular location, there is a game plan on how there's a reduction. There's also a reduction because over the last prior 8 years, the county government has shrunk. There's been a reduction of 1,000 employees, and certain services that we provided, we're not providing now. We have to determine how much of that should or shouldn't be restored. Open-ended question. And in that, I don't know the answer. I'll have to try to get you an answer. And if you do me a favor, take one of my cards before you leave so you can have an independent dialogue with me on it. And I'm happy to loop John in as well so he knows. But I'll get you an answer to that question.
Awesome. Thank you very much. And then, sorry, I didn't so much.
Just one more question. I think, as much as I hate them, I think the Red Sox are going to win at 6. But I hate them. But they're going to win at 6.
There's been a lot of articles out there and information that homelessness is actually on a decline in Westchester, which is great. So if that's the case, then there's a lot of the shelters down county that are underutilized and overfunded, and those funds are being taken back. So for example, CHOP has leftover money, from their grants they receive every year. That money should be going back, I think. I'm not sure about that, but that's really not my question. The question is, if homelessness is on a decline, does it make sense to spend millions of dollars to build a new facility that will be underutilized? So it's, again, consolidation, government spending, kind of have that oversight.
Well, I can tell you what you already know, which is if we were sitting in New Rochelle residents around an area don't want it in their neighborhood anyway, and they'd love for me to say it's going to decline and we're going to close one center and it's going to be in New Rochelle. And the people in Mount Vernon would like to say, hey, if you're going to decline, let's close the Mount Vernon Center. Because let's be honest, there's very little political support for homeless folk. Now, the problem, and I'll have to verify statistics, whatever decline there may be, I don't think it's dramatic enough for us to assume that we're going to be getting out of the business of dealing with people who are homeless. And I think we use the word homeless to describe people that have a wide range of issues. Many of those issues are not just the lack of a home. There's mental illness that's involved with this. There's a host of other problems that the individual has that makes it difficult for them to function in a society in the way we'd like to see it done. We also don't have sufficient affordable housing for people that would not be homeless if they had an option that they could afford, because there is market rate housing going up in places. It's profitable to build that. It's not really profitable to build affordable housing. You have to figure out how to incentivize it so somebody will put affordable housing in. And even at that level of it, the federal government isn't providing rental assistance for the people at the very bottom of that affordability range. So I don't think you can realistically expect somehow in the next couple of years, whatever decline there is going to be significant enough for us to say, hey, good news, we're closing the Peekskill operation. If that's where you're heading with the logic. I don't think that's realistic. What I do think is realistic is for us to try to project where we think we'll be over the next few years and then have a policy discussion about how these things are going to be handled to save as much money as we can. But understanding, and I gather, people say, oh well, they didn't come from our community. Every community says that. These people didn't come from nowhere. They came from somewhere. And as I said humorously, not seriously, but they didn't come from Pound Ridge. They came from someplace. And so we're going to have to house them in the places that they have come to cluster in, and it is in our urban centers where they cluster. And if we don't find an effective way to house them or serve them, then they will be on the streets and in the parks of our communities, and that's not the acceptable answer. So that's what we're trying to figure out. The last part of your question, we should try to figure out how to project this dynamic. I don't know that I can do that in a week or two, but that should be part of our discussion as we go forward.
I'd just like to add, I think you bring up some good points, and as a legislator in general, what I will do is ask, and I'm sure the county executive would like to have an overview from the commissioner, who's a very, very good commissioner, by the way. McGuire does a great job, and maybe we can get an overview of the process, the homeless population, the homeless shelter network, because I know in the past certain shelters are for certain classification of people. Some are for families, some are not. Some are for females, some are not. Whatever. So we need to get that landscape clarified, because maybe it's changed in a number of years since I last heard it. So we'll get that information as well.
And George, I'd just like to say this. I think everybody here appreciates your leadership. Finally, somebody in government stepping up and saying, hey, let's have a meeting together that brings all stakeholders and have an open discussion about what's taking place. And we have offered to join CHOP in finding an alternate, better location where the shelter would belong. And they don't want to have that open discussion with us. But what's great is you're stepping up and you want to bring us together, and that's excellent, and I think everybody appreciates it.
That's someone who hasn't spoken yet. Who's that? Deb?
Me?
Yeah.
Hi. I have a couple of questions regarding the business community here in our area. First of all, the Detroit power plants are closing in 2020 and 2021. Have you had any discussions with the state on the replacement of power here in this area? And also, what is going to be happening as far as the relief to our communities, the tax relief to our communities? $23 million in Henry School District will be lost. Half of Buchanan's budget will be gone. I think County Corporate will be losing $1 million. I'm sure the city of Peekskill is affected by this as well. I know Supervisor Puglisi has had some task force meetings working from the state in, but there's been very little communication as far as what is the plan to assist us in going through this transition of the next 4 years. And the second part has to do with small business as well. The earned sick time, paid sick time. There's a lot of issues coming down on small businesses that are affecting small businesses. And this is a small business community. The chamber has met with Representative Legislator Forja. We understand that the law is needed. However, we were adamantly proposing that she look at amending the legislation, which is now law, to increase the number of employees and increase the number of hours. And third, there's another state initiative.
You give me too many questions here. Let me start to answer some of them, and then if you have to go far. First of all, earned sick leave. I think you raised a question that has to be analyzed going forward. The law passed, and it passed with the threshold of 5. I spoke to David Tubiolo, John's colleague, who made the case that the threshold should have been set at another level. The majority of the legislature didn't peg it at that level. I signed the bill, but I also said informally, I said we should survey exactly what happens now going forward and over the next 6 months, year, make an assessment as to what the impacts would be, and the legislature has the right at any point in time to go back, revisit the law, and change the threshold if they think that it's not effective at the level that it's at now, and raise the threshold. That is a possibility, and I think what we need now is to have an understanding of how this thing gets implemented, and if these problems that are theorized become real problems, that there's a willingness to make a change. If the legislature decides to amend the bill, I'll sign it, and then we go forward. But I think it will take now an assessment, and yourself and other chambers, we're working very closely now with chambers of commerce all over the county to try to assess not just what they need, but also what's impacting them. So I'd say that's what will happen on earned sick leave going forward. I think it's why. Go ahead.
As one of the 5 who voted against it, or not 5, 4 of us voted against. No, 5 of us voted against it. Yeah, yes, 5. That was a very big sticking point to us. Obviously, many businesses already provide paid sick leave to their part-time employees because they want to make sure that their employees are healthy. But we felt that the 5 was too low. We pleaded from the very beginning to raise the number. We were encouraged in the beginning that was a possibility. And then at the end of the day, we were told no, that was not going to happen. The advocates for the bill would not go for that. So we were forced to be against it because of that. So I'd love to see it go up. I mean, Connecticut was one of the first ones to pass it. Their threshold is 50. So obviously that's a high number. We were hoping for like 15 or 20 to make it more reasonable for small businesses. So maybe that will happen in the future, but we'll have to see.
So just to close that off and go to your earlier response at your point, because I want to get to that. I think now what we do is we look at what happens over the next 6 months, get information back from your members of Hudson Gateway, and then the other chambers. Last night I was with the Worcester Chamber and a number of others in the county. We have a woman, I'm sure you know her, Shari Rosen Asher, on our team, whose job is to work with the chambers. If you talk to Shari on Monday or Tuesday, let's make that part of her responsibility to get information, share with the legislature, then if an amendment comes, it comes. Indian Point, 2 separate levels of activity. What we can do, what the state has to do. The issue of replacement energy, however that's going to be structured, that's within the responsibility of the state government to do it. Now, I was a state legislator up until January, and I had a lot of opinions about what I thought should happen. But now that I've shifted to do this job, I'm trying to focus on this job. And so it falls to your senator, your assemblywoman, to be the point of contact to try to make sure that the state does a few things. The state has a fund to help communities that have the closing of a power plant. This plant closes in sequence in 2020, 2021, and whatever the funding of that fund is going to be has to be robust enough in those budgets so that Buchanan, HUD, the Verplank Fire Department or library, whatever else is being funded, get some financial assistance to ease them to what's coming. I have a meeting coming up this week with Mayor Knickerbocker of Buchanan. I'm going to be up meeting with her. I visited the boards, I visited all these boards recently, and we're going to talk more specifically about what the financial impacts are on Buchanan and what the county can do specifically with Buchanan's, the way you're running your village government, what can we do to be helpful. They serve the biggest impact. It's much harder for the county to help a school district. We're in 2 different worlds. We have a police department, we have a DPW department, we could find cooperative things to do with the village or with the town. We don't run a school district, so that really is going to be the state, and I think what's going to have to happen is and what I would argue were I a state legislator still, is that HUD deserves an exceptional additional amount of money from the state to offset the hit that's coming to them. There will be a change in the pilot as Energy lowers its presence, and then Entergy has said to us they're going to sell their asset, including a multiple billion dollar decommissioning fund that's within their resources, to a decommissioning company. And nobody knows how that's going to work. And those are the people we're ultimately going to be negotiating with about what happens to the site. Separate from that, our economic development effort, Richard Gibbons and the people we have been involved in some meetings. I attended one of them. And we have to figure out how to promote this region of the county for alternate economic development to try to fill what gap exists and will exist. The one thing that came up when we were here for your meeting, when you asked me to come up and I spoke, is I don't know how to replace Entergy's private philanthropy. They have been hugely philanthropic, and even if we get 5 businesses that can hire some of the people that are losing their jobs, I don't know how you get those companies to do that which Entergy has done, and that's an open-ended question I don't have an answer for. Final point on Indian Point, as we go through these things. The nature of the impact on the county is of such a nature that it affects us, but it doesn't affect us in a dramatic way. If we're sitting at the table negotiating, we're going to argue in sequence that HUD and Buchanan should get the bulk of whatever resources are there, then Cortland, then the county. And that's our way of saying we're not going to be a pig at the trough because we have other resources, since we have the whole county to work off of, and target the resources into where it affects it the most. And hopefully that will be a decent response.
Well, I thank you, and I appreciate you continuing lobbying for us on this issue. And that is why the Chamber has created the Art Industry Media Initiative, attracting more businesses, media, and technology businesses up here. The last question I wanted, this is not really a county question, but you work on the state level.
Yep.
There is talk of the governor wanting to eliminate the tip wage credit, which is an appointed board. As you know, we have a lot of hospitality industries up here who would be greatly affected by the elimination of this tip wage credit. They did it in Maine. It was a disaster. They repealed it. Any insight on that?
To be honest with you, it's going to sound like a weasel answer, so I'm going to highlight it in advance. It's a very controversial issue. If I were there right now, I'd have to think it through and take a position on it. Right now, I got so much on my plate at the county. Get a hold of Sandy Galiff. Obviously, Terrence Murphy's in a battle with Pete Arkham. Whoever wins that, you talk to them. They're the people that will make the decision on your behalf. And I think that's where you devote your attention to. I see both sides of the problem, and it's a hard decision to make because there's pressure to do one thing, and there is a potential negative impact on the other side. But if you'll allow me to weasel out of something, let me go do my county work, and I'll leave my 13 years of the state behind me on that.
Thank you so much.
For the weasel.
Yes. Gotta be honest with you.
You guys made some really good points a few minutes ago about.
I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. I want to make a quick Indian point question. I wasn't prepared to wear that hat today, but I'm a part of the Howard with Portland Coalition. And I just want to know if you will be pushing the bill that's right now on the governor's desk to enable Henkites against additional school aid funding.
Well, I'm sorry, I'm not picking up what you're saying.
Currently, there's a bill on the governor's desk that will enable Henkites to get some additional funding for our capital improvement project.
Yeah, that's exactly what I just said they should do.
But I wanted to know if you're going to be endorsing.
Well, I support it, but you know, the Westchester County Executive endorsing it is not as important as the legislators for the district pushing it. But yes, as I just said, I think Henhut's in an unusual situation. There's no other school district in Westchester County that faces the loss of a big chunk of funding. So clearly, it needs more money, capital and operational money. So if I talk to my colleagues, the woman who took my seat showed me, I say, hey, do right by Henhut. They're in a difficult situation. So yes, I would support that.
Great.
Yes.
So I wanted to just highlight a few things that comments that you just had spoken about. Some interesting items would be, the importance of the shelter is not just to provide a roof over people's heads. It's also to
Father and son together.
Okay, you're fine. The importance is also to provide a continuum of care so that these people can get the rehabilitation that they need. All right. As a healthcare professional, that's one of the most important things that we're actually mandated by both the federal government and the state. I'm not sure where the homeless shelter governance falls into that. However, as you said, it is important to understand the population that makes up the homeless. You said before, in answer to Brendan's question, that we need to go and focus on determining what the population really is. The population in this particular shelter, it's not exactly easy for us to find out who's in the shelter, but we have done some research on our own. So as you can see here, there's a significant amount of public response to this particular shelter, this location currently. In 1 year, we had 192 public safety responses that's fire, EMS, and police. This particular post report here breaks down the EMS calls. What I wanted to make note is that there is a significant number, 41 calls in total that were related to violence, GDP, psych, substance abuse, and overdose, as well as man downs. So as a healthcare professional, I know when I used to run EMS calls, I did it for 10 years. Those calls, most of them go down county. So they're using the county resources as well as the local resources. And so, especially those EDP psych calls, Hudson Valley Hospital doesn't have the ability to handle psych patients. They don't have a psych unit. So those patients have to leave and go down county to Westchester or Phelps. So you're talking about not only are you using the county resources and the local resources, but you're also removing an ambulance from, or a crew from Peekskill for several hours. So that's leaving the community at risk.
What's your logical extension of your point?
So the logical extension is I just wanted to make aware of both the county as well as the local residents here, that this isn't just a Peekskill issue, or this isn't just a local, a homeless issue as in like, we need to find out what the community, the epidemiological impact is. We also have to look at the local impact. This is a specific local impact that you're going to be bringing to this location, to this area.
But I just want to go this way. You don't want it at 851 Washington. I got it. Where it is now, do you oppose it being there now if it's taken? No. Because all of those things apply under the current circumstance. There's a board that would look like this for the New Rochelle site. There's a board that would look like this for the Yonkers site. And it would have a certain amount of disproportionate police and fire and EMS calls because of the nature of who's being served at it. So I just want to understand that what you're saying is that these impacts should not be on Washington Street, but these impacts exist because of the constituency that we're dealing with. And as I said a few minutes ago, hang on, I'm with you, but let me get a point in. I said earlier that the people who are being served in these situations, they have a multitude of issues. Wherever they are, they're going to have these issues. So I get the geography piece. I just didn't understand, the point you were going to make about all of these different things. Yes, the homeless shelters always have a more impactful reality to basic services. If you had a senior citizen center, you'd have a lot less police calls, and you'd have a lot more EMS calls because of the nature of what it is. So, okay.
Well, one of the things that I wanted to segue that into is the reason why I brought all this up is because CHOP has continued to, in their dialogue with the public, was to say, oh, this won't bring an impact to the location. This won't bring more homes. This won't bring more, this and that. It's obvious that it will be bringing this type of activity into the neighborhood. I think that's very important. The second thing I wanted to bring up that has nothing to do with this was you said that we should, part of the negotiations should be about where did the locations that they looked at prior, the criteria that they've used to vet the process, so that why have they gone to Washington Street. Right?
I said those were questions you would naturally ask to answer that gentleman's question.
My only question, my last point is, do they have an obligation to provide an actual list of properties they look at?
I don't know that they legally have to provide it. I think it's a logical question to ask. I just said, when I answered that question that person asked, I said, what would I want to know? And I went through a series of things which, if I came in as I am from the outside saying, okay, tell me what we got here. What do you got here? What else have you looked at? Whether those things, if you've negotiated with somebody, if you had a discussion with somebody, but it didn't turn into a real proposal or negotiation, I don't know if that's a public document, it's a conversation you've had. Once you get to the point of having a formal proposal that deals with something, then it enters the public domain for FOIL and all that kind of stuff. I wouldn't expect you to tell me all the people you've talked to. Only when you talk to somebody and it became an action to be dealt with, should that have to be dealt with in a practical terms. But it would be good to know where else you've looked, if you have looked at other places, that's all.
Thank you.
No disrespect, Mr. Latimer, but for you to say that the homeless people that are here in Peekskill are not from Allen Ridge, or you don't know that the homeless and the drug addiction that's going around all over the United States is crossing all boundaries. The rich, the poor, there are many rich people that are now finding themselves homeless because of the drug problems. So I'm sorry for you to make that statement.
Look, I was being facetious, and you're correct, I shouldn't be facetious, but I think also what I was responding to was people sort of giving me the attitude that, I interpreted it to be we shouldn't have to worry about the homeless in Peekskill, they're not from here. And my observation is I find concentrations of homeless in all of our urban centers. And the suburban communities that I shouldn't have said to be funny are not the urban centers. So the practical reality of what I face is I have homeless people in Mount Vernon. I have them in New Rochelle, and I have them in Peekskill. That's the reality. So you're correct. You're correct to score me on being, trying to be funny. I speak very average. I said before about weaseling out of something. That's not what average politicians say. They don't admit things like that. I'm not your average politician. I'm 65 years old. I don't care if I get reelected. I didn't think I was going to win this seat. I'm here to do what I think is right.
concern, obviously, is the social, emotional well-being of our children and their ability to learn. And I just have to remind people of the article that came out in Boulevard in 2017, June of 2017, where the Peekskill City School District identified 380 students in our district who had experienced homelessness. So to say that these are not, and I don't know, I'm not saying that anybody here is saying that they're not from here. I don't know who thinks that or doesn't think that. I came with a broad brush. But if anybody thinks that they're not from Peekskill, they have to think again about that, because we are serving homeless students in our district. And that is a concern to me. So how are we, right? We have a moral, I believe, we all have a moral obligation to meet the needs of those students. So, you know, it makes me a little nervous. I understand that, but the question is there homelessness in Peekskill? And clearly there is, if we are serving those students, right? So then we have to figure out what does that mean, and what we, as the citizens and as the neighbors of those people, what are we responsible for? What is our moral responsibility? That's my question. Now again, I'm not saying, I know there are people in here that are fine with keeping a homeless shelter in Peekskill. I believe, maybe I'm wrong, but Brendan and Cheryl, your question made me nervous because it sort of sounded like you were indicating that we don't need a homeless shelter in Peekskill anymore. And I'm not ready to say we don't need one. I don't think, a lot of them are not saying that. I understand that. I'm literally saying that. Right? I think there are a lot of people in this room that want to keep a homeless shelter in town, and that's fine and that's good, and I hope that we can work out a solution. But I'm worried about those people who maybe are thinking it's time to get rid of a homeless shelter.
No, it's not what I said.
I didn't say
We clarified that. You came a little late, but we clarified.
Just clarify.
Frank, go ahead.
Well, we don't need anybody telling us what our moral obligations are, that's for sure.
We have no
moral obligation to take care of Mount Vernon's homeless, okay? That's the first question. My question
What
is,
about the 380
thank you for being here. It's kind of a two-part question. Has the county closed or planned to close any county-run homeless facilities or stop the funding to any homeless shelters?
No, not right now.
You have no
My
plans?
knowledge, there's no plans to close any of the homeless shelters that exist now.
Okay.
There is a relocation effort that's being underway, looked at in the Omnibus.
Okay. And has the county indirectly encouraged this application?
We haven't.
Directly or indirectly?
As an executive and as a county legislator, no. I don't necessarily know what every individual who works for county government might have said or done as part of the discussion process. But the policy of the executive branch and through John, the legislative branch, is neither to encourage nor discourage any action.
Okay. And as a 61-year-old, I think you're in great shape.
You're a mere youth. Wait another 4 years.
All right, so I know you guys haven't had a chance to look at their plan or their architectural plan. When you get a minute, go on their website, you can look it up. You have to use a magnifying glass and some of that stuff, because I did. The way they're designing the building is they have 13 office spaces, an administration space, and a lounge, 2 lounge areas for the administrators, and a cot area, and 14 bedroom areas with 2 beds in it. So I see that the administration type rooms equals the space almost exactly like you would have for the residents. So how does that help? And how are they going to be able to do anything when they're cutting their space down? They're going to have 200 calls now coming in. You're going to put 40 people here. You're going to have 400 calls coming in because you have 20 people down there now. It's just common sense. This neighborhood is a residential neighborhood, and I know a lot of people because I've been here for 20 years on the street, and none of the people I've spoken to really are in for pushing the shelter out of the town. They just want to keep it in an area where it doesn't affect the residents of the town as bad as it could. And this is a bad spot, and you guys know that, and you've said it a million times, but if we can't help them find another place, then we're not doing our job either. So where they want to go is bad. So let's just, if they can sit with us and interject into their business a little bit, which I kind of hate sticking my nose in somebody else's business, so I wouldn't want them to do it to me, maybe we can find them a more suitable location where they can flourish and expand what they got to expand on. Because I just don't want to see it go away. You know, I know we need it. As the other gentleman down there yelling and screaming, we need it. I mean, my wife drives buses, and I know exactly where the kids live that are homeless and all that kind of stuff. And there's a lot of bad stuff that goes on in every city. That's just how it is. You can't fix it all. None of us can fix it all. But we need to help them find a place where they can at least start to help these people. Because these people come there, and they get paid pretty handsomely to wash them. They're not getting a little bit of money here. They're getting $3,600 a month, roundabout. But those people don't sleep there. Then they push them out in the daytime, and then they're just lost, and they don't have any direction. Maybe they should come up with a program where they can address some of the business owners in town, and maybe they can put them to work. Maybe they pay us a few dollars to have these guys go. We can teach them a skill, because these people got to have something going. They got to have something that they want to do. Maybe they want to be a chef. They want to work in a laundromat or the dry cleaners or one of the stores. I take somebody in and teach them how to be a mechanic. There's all kinds of shops around here, all kinds of businesses around here that have help wanted signs. So maybe if they were to be a little more vocal with the shop owners and have a meeting with us, maybe we can get somebody to work. And they can get these people off the homeless thing, and we can get them out, solve the problem.
Yes, Lindsay.
2 questions. Number 1, so the county, as I understand, provides something like $600,000 to $700,000 a year to CHOP in the form of grants.
No, not grants, it's contract.
Okay, thank you.
Contract service.
Contract services. And I think that's for a certain number of beds or something like that. If that funding is not spent every year, is there an obligation to spend it on something or return it?
You know, I'd have to look at the contract, and by the way, again, since I've been in office 10 months, these contracts precede my tenure as county executive. The best I can tell you is we'd have to look at the contract and see exactly what it is. It might be a boilerplate that applies to other things. It might be something uniquely structured around this particular need. But I couldn't answer the question until we looked at the contract, how the money is conveyed, to what service, what's the metrics that determine it, and we'd have to look at that.
I think that would go into what I mentioned before, sitting down with the commissioner and going through the whole county program and the oversight that they may have for that funding only, and see what comes out of that overview.
I can speak to that issue. Every year, the county audits and goes through to see expenses against reimbursement and sees whether the county has underpaid or overpaid or whether it's a break even. It doesn't happen always the year before. It takes, it's a process, but every single year the county conducts that audit and goes through every single expense, every single reimbursement, and if there's underspending, meaning that they didn't pay us as much as they should have, they pay us when we request it, when they complete the audit and say how much is owed. If they say that we billed them more than they should have paid us, then they give us that amount and the money goes back. That's the process.
Okay.
I have another question, but did you have a comment on that?
To that point or something different?
Let me ask you another question.
Go ahead.
Wait, hold on, one other question. So we continue to hear that the proposal for 851 Washington Street is not expanding. However, we just heard from Brian that there's going to be 14 rooms with double beds, and we heard from the architect that there's another emergency room with like another 10 beds, which means that that's like 50 beds if you do the math. And Cynthia, please feel free to comment on this.
Absolutely.
If you're not, hold on, if you're not expanding, then why are the number of beds doubling that are in the architectural plans? Go ahead.
You got it. Thank you. Okay. No, and we have put this out repeatedly. We spoke about it at our community meeting. We put it in our slides. We are not expanding the number of beds.
How many beds do you have now?
Let me finish. We are expanding for a day room, so overnight clients who currently leave in the morning, except when it's code blue, have a place that they can go. Because right now, where we are, if anybody has ever been inside this shelter, there's very little common space. So in the 851 plans, there is a common space for overnight guests, which is a way for them to stay and engage in services during the daytime. To Brian's point, we are also expanding our administrative offices. Currently, we have at least 7, and I have to count in my head every single person. We have at least 7 people working in a room with dividers. These are case managers and administrative personnel. It means that our veterans case manager meets with a veteran in a place that's a little bit of a closed-off cubicle. You've all seen those movable cubicles. So she has a veteran sitting, like this gentleman here, and I'm sitting here, and I'm the veterans case manager. And so I'm trying to work with this veteran, and there are 6 other people doing work around me. And a lot of the issues are very sensitive issues. So not having a private space for the veterans case manager to be able to sit down, talk with that veteran, and really understand his or her story is a barrier to the work. And that holds for every other single case manager, whether they're working with one of our clients in our permanent supportive housing program, where people live in their own apartments, that they come into the office oftentimes to talk to the case manager, or whether it's the case manager working with our Department of Social Services clients. So yes, we are expanding our administrative offices. To your question, Lindsay, we have 35 beds in the facility currently with an average daily occupancy of 24, which you know because you foiled the information from the city on our average daily occupancy and how many beds we have. We are not expanding our beds. We have put that out in writing in numerous forums, and people don't want to believe it. I can't make people believe things. What I can do is put out accurate information, hold community meetings, and yes, at the first community meeting, we presented a lot of information because there was a lot of misinformation out there. And we didn't have as much time as we wanted for Q&A, but we had a lot of stuff that we needed to get out there. And people know that we have another community meeting scheduled for November 4th.
No, that's how to be a good neighbor. That's yes.
You know what? Somebody made that point to me in one of our group meetings, and it was not intended that way, but I can see.
But you put it out that way. And that's how we got down.
Can I finish? Somebody made that point to me, and I agreed with them. And I said, yeah, you know, that's
why
not.
Why would you post it? Why would you post it? As the executive director, why didn't you look at that and say, we're not going to put this out there to our neighbors, but you let it go?
Because I'm running a nonprofit organization and trying to work on this relocation, and bottom line, because I'm a human being. And
we're not.
Okay, well,
guys, we got to
what we'd
interrupt.
like to do, since the county executive has to leave in a few minutes, and we're not trying to sidestep the issue because we are going to be addressing this, obviously. Is there any other topics that people have a question on before he leaves that needs to be addressed? Who haven't asked the question?
I had a question about you was talking about the Andrew County School District. How much in closing the plant, that's going to be a big hit to the Andrew County School District? In regards to it, like, when you saying a big hit, you talking about a big hit for everybody in the Andrew County School District, the taxes?
Well, what it is that right now, I don't know the numbers, somebody may in the room. There's a payment in lieu of tax arrangement, which Entergy negotiated with the village, the school district, the town of Cortland, the county of Westchester. I think those are the 4 participants. And they identify the amount of money that they're going to pay annually to each of those entities. The number in my head is that number equals 42% of the Buchanan Village revenue.
That is correct.
Is that the right number, Dwayne?
That's the right number.
I don't know what that percentage is for the Hen Hut district, but when that number either shrinks dramatically or disappears, that creates a big hole in the Hen Hut budget. So that's why we said, and I don't know if they didn't get any other revenue, what they would do, how they would do it. But that's why I said that the state, which gives direct aid to school districts, that's the single biggest source beyond property taxes, is state aid to education that every school district has. Our friend from Peekskill can probably make that comment. So that is where the state will have to compensate. The county can't do it for the school district. We don't deal with the education issues. We could, in theory, come up with some ways to help Buchanan and Cortland in general government, because we do things that they do, police, DPW, recreation, and so forth. But we have no school teaching function. That's got to come from the state.
Just to clarify, I'm a member of the New York State Task Force, the local task force for the closure, and the numbers are pretty daunting. But what's happening is the state had, first of all, the pilot, as the county executive mentioned, as soon as the plant closes, over, I think, a 5 to 7 year period. Every year, the amount of payment goes down. But there's a cessation fund in the state that 24 million was just added to, dedicated to Cortland this past year. So that will help over that 5 to 7 years mitigate that. But after that, then the area is on their own. So that's why a long-term plan is trying to be implemented on increase of economic development, which the county executive came to one of our meetings a couple months ago early on to offer the help with the economic development portion of it. The state also has people involved, so we have to find a long-term solution. That's what we're trying to do.
John, you mentioned local communities around the hub. How about the entire downstate area that's going to be impacted by the cost of electricity? Does anybody know where the replacement electricity is going to come from?
They do have a list of areas where they believe they are going to get the replacement energy. You talk to some people, have an opinion which I don't agree with, that the energy is already there, which I don't believe. There are other plants opening up, the CPV plant, Cricket Valley plant, I think it's called. Some of them are, one of them just opened. Others are set to open. Some are being challenged to open. So there is it's a wide open issue. But they do have a listing of the energy, but I don't know if those plants are going to be available.
Nobody knows.
Nobody knows.
You know, I spoke to the attorney who works for North Star, buying the facility.
That's a decommissioning company.
Right. And he's back and forth to Albany. They have no clue where they're going to replace it, where they actually end up replacing energy at this point in time. So I think the whole process has been a boondoggle. They're putting the cart before the horse.
Yes, I agree with you. Yes.
Just one last comment. I don't know if we had all found out that CHOP doesn't really even have to move. They're being allocated even more space to do construction and improvements and everything else. So it seems, why don't they just stay? And that's a good question that we've been asking.
Those are the things. That's one of the things we'll probably address in our little meeting that we're going to. Yes, Bob.
That's not a correct statement. Phil Miller does not own the building. He's the one that has been putting out that he's offered that. Phil Miller does not own the building. WSH LLC owns the building.
And they offered you the chance to stay.
One last question.
No,
if I may.
they have not.
All right, guys, one last question.
Mr. Latimer, one of the things that we didn't know here in Peekskill is when all the foil was made about these EMS calls and police calls. I don't think anybody did that. I certainly didn't know. 192 police and EMS calls in a year is a lot. Now the question I have, because the homeless is a county issue, you have a contract with a not-for-profit to take care of it. Remember that all these EMS calls, every police officer that goes there, the city of Peekskill police officer, it's at the cost of the city of Peekskill. Would you consider on the county level either, first of all, getting security protection for that area if it remains down on Water Street, or reimbursing the city for the increased security services we have to provide?
Bob, if we take what you say to the extreme, you're going to raise your county property taxes, right?
Well,
you want me to do that?
Taxes, so
Well, no, it's a big difference. If you want me to raise your county property taxes, which I don't really want to do, and you want to start charging back between agencies to get the burden off of Peekskill, for a Peekskill facility, then remember, we would be doing the same thing in Yonkers, the same thing in Mount Vernon, and the same thing in New Rochelle. So here's what I will commit to do. We're going to look at this issue in detail and determine those circumstances. But those numbers up on the board, you're looking at Peekskill numbers in Peekskill. You don't know what those numbers look like in New Rochelle. And if you're worried about your county taxes, you should know what those numbers look like too. Because whatever we do, Bob, we're going to have, whatever we do, we're going to have to do everywhere in this county, not just in Peekskill. Go ahead.
Okay, but the issue is the security number. Somebody's got to take care of that, and it's a county function that's placed there through this not-for-profit.
You're going to, on that basis, then you're going to say that if a fire department or a police department comes to a business store, that business should contribute more money to the running of the department. It is a general service. No, hold on. It's a general service that's provided by the local government. What about a hospital? Does a hospital which has more response calls have to then pay that much more for the service?
I know, but for ambulance, I pay. She's still volunteer ambulance, I got paid for it.
Yeah, me
But
too.
it's 190% calls.
Me too if I need it. Okay. I'm going to have to go, and let me just finish it with a couple of things. John, I appreciate your courtesy.
Thank you very much.
And your hospitality. Two things that I have on my list to commit to do. One of them is to set up a meeting at Peekskill City Hall with relevant players. We have to figure out who that is. And those who oppose the Washington Street site will have to identify 4 to 5 people that would sit in on behalf of the neighborhood, not more than that, because we're not going to have, this is a good open session. We're not going to make any progress in a meeting where we're sitting around a table with 30 people and everybody's got to get their words in. It's just the way it is. And we'll try to accomplish that. Now, we're in the middle of a budget process. I guess the city's in the middle of a budget process. I don't know when we'll schedule it, but we'll make an announcement. We'll work through John. He's your legislator to do that. The second thing, Lindsay, was your request. I'm going to ask you to codify your questions in a letter to John. Identify what you want to know about the existing contracts that the county has here in Peekskill. When you get those letters, John, I'll instruct the commissioner to come to a meeting of the Board of Legislators. You can ask them all these questions. We'll find out what the answers are. You can report back, and then you'll know the details. And the other thing you're going to have to do to evaluate that, you're going to have to look at other contracts with other communities that have homeless shelters. Because again, this is not just a one-off. It's not the only place in the county we do this. You have to look at all of them. I've got to go. I appreciate your courtesy. If I've seemed a little combative at times, it's just who I am. I'm an Irish-Italian kid, blue collar, south side of Mount Vernon, and I respect you. If you respect me, we have a little give and take, but the respect is mutual. I appreciate your time. We'll follow up.